Welcome to an introduction to transfer pricing. Today, our topic is going to be adjustments. And by adjustments, I mean adjusting the comparable firms to make them more similar to the tested party, or adjusting all firms, tested party and comparables, to make them more similar to each other. We're going to begin with an example we've used in the past, earlier in this series of lectures, of a relatively simple CPM where our related party is UKCO and the comparables are Able, Baker, Charlie, and Delta. But I'm going to do the rest of this presentation in an Excel sheet so that we can see how calculations are done. Well, let's go back to our original example where we were in our very simple case of a CPM, and we were looking at a related party called UKCO, which we've got up here in this cell. And UKCO has four comparable firms, the ones next to it: Able, Baker, Charlie, and Delta companies. Now, you've seen these numbers before, and we worked through coming up with the range, and you can see that the low in this range is 2.5% down here at their operating margin, and the high in the range was the 8.33%, and we use that as a very simple example. Now what we want to do is ask the question, could we adjust these comparables and make them better comparables for the related party? Now, one of the things that can make firms different and therefore have different operating margins is the issue about whether they're taking advantage of accounts payable or trade credit, that when they buy something from a supplier, that the supplier might be giving them so many days to pay, and that's of a valuable sort of impact from a financial point of view. So let's expand this problem and just make things a little more interesting. We're going to say, let's suppose that these firms have different levels of accounts payable. So there are various different suppliers who are offering them credit. As you can notice, what's probably the most dramatic one would be that the Able company doesn't. Not all of its suppliers demand that it pays cash, and all the others get a certain amount of credit. Well, what's the benefit of that credit, and what's going to be the impact of it? So this is going to be an adjustment. We're adjusting to all of these parties as if they had to pay cash, which means implicitly they'd have to, if need be, like borrow money so that they could pay their bills daily, sort of situation. Well, we want to come up with what the value of that is. The first thing we need to be thinking about is the value of money, and that's going to be taking into account the interest rate. Of course, as the interest rates get lower, then the time value of money is much less. But let's suppose here that we know that the prevailing interest rate is 2%. Now, the benefit that we're going to receive is going to happen at some time in the future. So essentially, I'm being allowed to pay you the money I owe you, not today, but say 30 days from now, in which case it's as though you've given me a loan for those 30 days of the amount of money in the accounts payable. So if that's the case, I'm going to get that money back in the future, so I'm going to have a discount on that advantage. The net present value of that time in the future being discounting it back, and therefore we're going to use a discount rate, which is the interest rate divided by 1 plus the interest rate. So that gives us more sort of what is today's net present value of that benefit. Now, so if we look at this, then we can say, well, what's the benefit of vendor financing? Well, the easy case is to look at Able Company first, because here you can see that cell 0. They don't have any benefit from this. They already have a 0 accounts payable. Everybody makes them pay cash for what they get. But all the other firms have some amount of benefit. And we get that by looking at the discount rate times the accounts payable, which tells us the benefit on a net present value basis here. And you can see these numbers that change from the different firms, and it's going to be dependent upon, how large are the accounts payable overall, plus, the discount rate. Well, let's take this a little bit further now. Let's suppose we're going to adjust their operating profit. What we would do is we would say, if they were paying cash, they would get a better price. The price that they would demand is to say the amount of that benefit. So we're going to add that benefit to their operating profit as though they bought the cost of goods sold for that much less money because they were paying cash. I'm hoping that makes sense. So now we have a new operating profit number that we can use. And when we take that operating profit and we look at it relative to sales, we now have new adjusted operating margin. And that's adjusted in this case just for the accounts payable. We're going to talk about some other adjustments that we do for accounts receivable and for inventories, commonly done. But in this case, this is how we do the adjustment for the accounts payable, and this is an adjustment to cash. So the interesting thing here is to say, well, this is interesting because Able Company already was at cash, so there's no change in their operating margin. Their adjustment was 0, but all of the others have changed a small bit. Now you might say, is this really a big advantage or a big difference? Well, I'm going to calculate a couple of numbers quickly for you. Right up here in this cell, I'm going to say, I'm going to make this cell equal to the highest comparable I had divided by the lowest comparable I had. And when I do that, I can say here it's 333%, or the high is 3.3 1/3 times what the low is. If I go down here to this cell and I take again, make this equal to the highest comparable I have now divided by the lowest comparable after the adjustments, there I can see the rate is less. In other words, the high is now less than 3 times what the low is. So the range has narrowed up. But in general, the reliability factor here ought to be better because the range is now narrower. And I don't like to measure the narrowness of a range based upon the delta in the interest rate because that doesn't allow me to compare them across different profit level indicators. So I've always taken to the habit of asking how many times is the 75th percentile divided by the 25th percentile. Well, with that, thank you. Have a good day. And I hope you've learned something about how you would adjust to cash. In our following videos, we're going to talk about adjusting to the tested party, which is much more commonly done.